I mean, now we kind of got to go into it because it's like you just said we
I
don't
gotta hear the horrendous.
Yeah,
Horrendous.
like,
Yeah,
horrendous.
let's see the train wreck. That's what we should.
It's like show me the bodies. Oh no!
Hit us with the high points.
We want to get the view count up on this video, John. Come on.
You can leave names out, and
Okay.
you know.
You're listening to the White Blood Cells Podcast.
Tell us a story, Ted.
Okay. So there's a barking dog in my neighborhood at 4 a.m. this summer, right? It's summertime. We're sleeping with the windows open. And there's a dog that barks at 4 a.m. My wife is a light sleeper, so obviously she wakes up and can't get back to sleep. I've actually met this guy who's got the barking dog. He's about a half a mile away. He's not in our neighborhood. He's like one neighborhood over. So I have to drive out of my neighborhood, find this guy. And it took me a little bit to find him because it was hard to identify exactly
At
for the
4
dog
a.m.
bark.
and it's dark outside.
I didn't. Thankfully, the time I found him wasn't 4 a.m. But
Okay.
in my slippers out there,
Your robe, you hadn't trimmed your hair, so it's just kind of like,
I had bedhead.
yeah.
Right. No. So 5 a.m. I'm in a shortcut. I found the guy one day. He's in his backyard, and the backyard faces the street, so I actually can see him. He's got a dog out there. He's sitting on his back porch. He's got not just one dog, but he's got like 6 dogs back there, and I think they're Belgian Malinois. I don't know if you know that dog. It's like a pretty big dog. It's a police dog. They
Yeah, it looks like a shepherd.
looks like a shepherd, short hair shepherd, and he's breeding dogs in this neighborhood. I go up to him and I'm like, "Hey, man," I give him the same bit that I do the motorcycle guys, and he's pretty controlled actually. And we talked this thing through, and I'm like, "Look, I live quite a distance away, but this, you're definitely impeding on my wife's sleep and my sleep and all this other stuff. Could you take issue with that? Just, empathize with our situation." And he's like, "Look, I'm, my neighbors have already issued, they called the animal control. They've, and he goes, I much more prefer what you're doing is just coming over here and talking to me face to face and presenting these problems." And I said, "Yeah, I just want to talk it over. I mean, I don't really agree with that, but she probably felt like her hands were tied and that was the only remedy she's got." And, anyway, we sorted it out, and he kind of agreed that, he would do his best to take issue with that. And my concern is he had the dogs barking after that a little bit, but it did tone itself down a little bit. But my biggest issue with it was like I almost wanted to go confront his neighbors. Like, why is the next door neighbor? Why are the 10 neighbors right around him?
Yeah.
Why am I like a half a mile away, coming from another neighborhood, having to deal with? And this is how I kind of feel with the motorcycles, the street racers, and all these things. Why am I the guy? Why aren't there people closer to this, kind of stepping on this problem and doing something about it, because in a healthy culture, I think there would be those people. Your next door neighbor, I mean, that's biblical 10 commandment stuff, right?
Yeah, love thy neighbor
Love
as
thy neighbor,
thyself.
right?
Yeah.
And so just knowing that this is part of the white blood cells thing, I think is like, where are the neighbors that are just right next door? How do we engage ourselves to be those neighbors who are like, we don't have to call the police. We can police our own environment to some extent. I mean, there's bigger cases where it's going to go beyond our capability, but for the dog barking, that's a neighbor issue that can easily be solved with neighbor.
So I'm guessing that you're asking the why. So probably to get to the why, right? Why aren't the 10 neighbors around this guy policing him so that you maybe don't have to? You can worry about within 10 houses of you, right?
Yes, exactly. Right.
So what are people's motivation? I mean, I think that's where we need to go, right? So obviously
but don't you think it depends on the community too?
Oh, sure.
Because Adam's probably in a community where if something was happening that you could go talk to, because he lives in a smaller community, you know?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I have a story that actually lines right up with that. Right when I moved in, there was a terrible, just beaten down, terrible designed chicken coop. And so I tore it down, dug a big hole, and had a fire and, burned it, basically. What else do you do with a bunch of scrap wood in the country? And so while I was doing that, the fire department showed up, came through my neighbor's yard, and said, "You have to have a permit to have a fire." And I showed him, I had a fire extinguisher there. I had a hose ready. The hole was dug. There was nothing, combustible. I was doing all the right things sort of from a physics perspective, but I didn't know that you needed a permit. So they let me sign one on the spot, and they were super cool about it. There was no fine or anything. So I signed a permit on the spot to have the fire I was already having, and there was no issue because they could see it was. But I went over to my neighbor. I said, I won't say his name. I said, "Hey, how come you didn't just come talk to me?
Right.
Like, why didn't you just come say something if you had a concern?" I said, "We've been friendly, and we'd only been there a couple months, but, so far we've been friendly. We chatted, we introduced, like, why didn't you just come say something?"
Yeah.
And I think maybe getting to the crux of that question might answer a lot of the things. Like, what is the breakdown that causes someone to first call the authorities rather than go speak to somebody?
Right.
And I think there has been a breakdown there in society, and I don't have the answer, but
Well, do you think it's because we've been conditioned?
yeah, well,
I mean, I think we've been conditioned to not to be docile, to not want to disrupt things, or because I think in my mind I'm thinking like, man, if I go talk to my neighbor, like that might be weird or awkward or uncomfortable.
Right.
And let me just call the authorities and, let them deal with it.
to me, like, something strikes me, like, and it's not necessarily conditioning, but it's more just the idea that strikes me as to, when I ask that question, why would you call the cops versus just going to talk to your neighbor who has been friendly to you in the past? And I just think that sort of the way culture has developed and the way media has developed, and it's sort of allowed us to dive deep into our own little rabbit hole and not interact with. You don't have to interact, sort of. You can come out of your rabbit hole and get in your car and go to your next rabbit hole, and just your little sort of secluded islands, and you're not required to interact with anybody. I don't know how you fix it or how it happened, but I think that sort of gives you that allowance.
No, that's exactly right. And like social media, I mean, if I watch a Trump video, I'm going to get a stream of red
Total
videos
bubble.
to go further down the rabbit
Yes.
hole, to your point.
Yep.
I'm not going to get any blue
No,
YouTubes to balance it out.
because that doesn't pay. It
Right.
doesn't. Yeah, questioning and sort of being open to other. What pays is like that vitriol and whatever's driving you to watch that video. Maybe it'll drive you a little more and deeper
Yeah.
and deeper, and that's what the advertisers are going for.
Well, exactly. Maybe because of that, we're kind of baseline afraid of our neighbors. Like to your point, I mean, I would probably go talk to my neighbor, right? But I definitely agree with Mark's point, because I've got a pretty horrendous neighbor story from Florida that we don't need to go into now. But it's yeah. I mean,
now we kind of got to go into it, 'cause it's like you just said we
I
don't
gotta hear the horrendous.
Horrendous.
Like,
Yeah.
horrendous.
Let's see the train wreck. That's what we should.
It's like, show me the bodies. Oh, no.
Hit us with the high points.
We want to get the view count up on this video, John. Come on.
Well,
You can leave names out, and
okay. So our neighbor in Florida was an ex-cop. And, if you want to know about the underground and shady shit, you go to a cop, right? Because they see it all.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, this is the real short version, but he built his dock. So we had this beautiful property in Florida, and our property was kind of pie shaped, right? And the back where the pie went down, got narrower, was where we had property on the intercoastal. And he was the neighbor over here, and we were in a little cove. So his went like this. Well, he decided it was okay, without talking to us, to build a dock way out into and I looked at it one day. He made a lot of progress in one day, right? I thought, I think that's on our line. So I kind of went to him. I said, well, I'm not okay with this because the kids. And he said, well, basically, like, tough shit.
He's like, I don't
Come
care.
at me, bro.
And so I said, okay. So I called the authorities. And the next thing I know, a week later, he's sawing with a metal saw. He's sawing his
line.
deck right on the line, right? Well, then I'm out with family, and we coming back from dinner, and we pull into the driveway, and he just looks totally disheveled and just really bad, really grim. And he was kind of a scary looking dude anyway. And so I was like, oh God, what's this? So we're coming in, and I open the door. I don't notice it until after he's gone. But there's pig. I find out later it's pig blood, but it's all over my wife's car and it's all over the front door.
What?
And so I'm distracting the kids and everything, like while we're trying to clean it up. And so that was the start of. So I think people are afraid of issues like that.
The psycho cop and pig blood.
Psycho cop and pig blood. Yes.
That's what we all think's going to happen when we
Right.
go to our neighbor, and you just
Right.
affirmed it.
Right.
All right. White blood cells is over. Let's go home.
Last
There's no
podcast.
reason.
Yeah, it's like, okay.
What are we doing here?
That sort of describes the issue, though. I mean, we're allowed to exist within our silos, and we're not required to meet our neighbors. So then, as a result, that we have no empathy for the neighbors that we've never met. There's no connection. There's no, I see where he's coming from,
Yeah.
because we're allowed to exist in this way. And when I say allowed, I mean, who's supposed to police that? But something has happened to sort of break culture to allow, and I think it's the rise of media and social media and other things that allow us to sort of specialize in the line of thought that we subscribe to. And we can specialize in that forever to our heart's content. And there will always be people that will, confirm those beliefs that we have and tell you how right you are and how wrong anyone else is. And it's just really easy to do that versus a place where we're forced to sort of deal with each other and learn about each other and gain empathy.
Right.
That's the key, is being forced to do it, I think, is right. And this is one of the things that before, like, will be a centerpiece on the white blood cells thing, is personal responsibility, right?
Mm-hmm.
You, like, the realm of human socialization is, like, we're talking about flat Earth, right? There's the realm of the physical universe, as far as I know, before flat Earth, is about gravity. It's held together with gravity.
Yeah.
Let's just assume that that's true for the sake of
Yeah.
argument, right?
Yeah.
We can pretend.
The other thing, we can pretend. Okay,
We pretend this long. Let's just,
pretend,
yeah,
yeah.
for the sake of
now.
conversation
Let's
today.
humor me on this one, you guys. So let's pretend that there's an equivalent force in society, in keeping humans kind of checked and balanced, right? That force, I believe, is personal responsibility. I think we've talked about this before a little bit. Like, if I make a mistake, if I walk off the edge of this building, it's going to be my consequence for falling to the ground, right? It's not going to be, there's not going to be anybody but me who's going to bear the responsibility for that. Now, if we put a foam pad down below, well, then that mitigates it to some degree. If we put an insurance company in the place where, now we get to bail you out for your broken leg, and now the insurance company is going to bear the responsibility. Well, now we start short-circuiting all of the personal responsibility stuff, you see. And so that's where, in this developed culture where all we've done is insulate ourselves from the personal responsibility mechanism that would be essentially training us to force ourselves through, okay, this guy might be a dick and he might, pull his gun on me, or he might pour pig blood on my cars, but maybe knowing that, I'm going to go over there and try to manage this situation as diplomatically as I can so that my message actually gets heard by him.
Right. So you've
that's
told
cool.
me a couple stories about the motor. You referred to the motorcycle incidents, stopping people in the road and going to this guy. And I'm just wondering how you do that. You obviously have some skill doing that, because you don't get, you're 6'3", 12 or something.
I'm 6'13".
He's shaped like a Greek god. If you're only listening to
No.
this podcast,
If you're
go
only
check
listening-
out
no,
the
no.
YouTube.
So
I am
probably
a
helps. But how do you,
weakling.
but how do you actually, like, those first few sentences are pretty important. How do you
dude,
not
it's
trigger them?
It's totally trial and error, because in the old days, and I'm not a badass, and I'm also just weird, not that scared, right? So like I've confronted these guys in the beginning just by saying, hey, do you realize you're annoying the fuck out of the entire universe with that thing? And then that response is right, and then
Yeah.
they're just kicking sand more so in your face. So it's just been a learning process. Finally, I've learned from that video that I sent to you guys the other day with the guys. Did I send that to you? With the guy starts off the speech with lighting up a cigarette on stage. Anyway. Okay, never
No.
mind.
It was real good.
Okay.
He makes the point about he's got us further into the speech. Had nothing to do with lighting a cigarette, by the way. But further into the speech, he makes the point he's got a 4-year-old son, and his 4-year-old son is drawing on the walls with markers, and we all have kids. So
Yeah.
probably all recognize that. And he's like, oh, wait, what are you doing? Are you stupid? He says to the kid. And so the next day, the kid does it again. And he's like, so my message obviously didn't get through. So the next time he did that, I said, look, you're a big boy now. Big boys don't do that. Right. And that shift in just empowering the kid to be the big boy. And that's what I did with the motorcycle guy a long time ago. After the first one, the next one, I pulled the guy over and I'm like, okay, so I'm going to tell you something that's going to probably piss you off, but I don't want you to get pissed off. Okay. I just want you to hear me out. So, I give him the whole bit about like banging on his hood with a ball peen hammer. And I said, what if I did that to your car? And he's like, well, I'd probably kill you. And I said, yes, and justifiably so, because I'm destroying your property. But now imagine what your noise, that muffler that you put on this car, is doing to thousands of people. You're basically taking a ball peen hammer to their peace and tranquility. So I just want you to think about that. And I want you to think about, I said, you're a dad, right? To this guy. He's like, yeah. And I said, your job as a dad is to take care of your family, right? And he could not disagree with that. And I said, but also as part of your community, your job is to take care of that community too. So you wouldn't just drive through your community and dump trash out your window and throw it on the neighbor's lawn. He's like, no, of course not. And so that strategy is not really that hard to figure out once you can just put yourself in the position of the other guy and realize, how do I empower this guy to just be a responsible person himself, to engage his personal responsibility, right?
Well, that first line of I'm going to say something that might piss you off, but I'd like you if you didn't get pissed off. That's really, that neutralizes
that.
things, right?
Totally neutralizes.
If
you're
you're
right.
sane. Yeah.
And I don't know, like, so that, and it's different in every situation, but I think you're right. Like, to find some way to neutralize because once you're
a lot of high
antagonizing
energy.
somebody, it's really high energy. That's why I told you, if we go out and do this on the street, the first couple minutes, like, you're trying to engage somebody, you're driving in a car, that is the most antagonistic scenario you can ever find yourself in. The cool thing for you in your car is you have insulation around you, right? And it's pure insulation, because even if your window's down or whatever, you can still just drive away. And Harley guys, forgive me for all you Harley guys out there for saying this, but this is something to kind of think about, is rarely do they really want to engage you with an actual intelligent conversation about what they're doing. Because I think in the backs of your minds, nobody's ever challenged this in you. You kind of know that you're kicking sand in the whole world's face. And that's why you have the tailpipes, right? And there's something kind of like anti-authoritarian about that probably appeals to that part of you. But at the same time, it ain't right.
What? Maybe you guys could help me. Is this like a series or videos that you've done where you confront bikers.
This is a pastime of Ted's.
Can you just give me the background so it makes more sense to me?
For whatever reason, this has been like it's totally metaphoric for my white blood cells thing, and I've been stuck on this for like 10 years, right? We've created an environment, and it's not just Harleys. It's what's the movie with the street racer?
Fast and the Furious.
Fast and Furious. You're a total fan. I know.
Big fan.
He's seen all 12.
Vin Diesel, number one actor of all time.
Keep cranking these things out, man. I mean, it's crazy. So to kind of go to your point about how we've been conditioned by these sorts of, I mean, that series of movies is definitely conditioning these young kids, young guys who drive those.
That it's fine to just be a total
antagonistic dick. Yes, because what else is the purpose? I mean, I get young guys kind of want to be like independent and they want to find themselves and whatever, but that is one of the most, I don't know, it just seems anti-social, and it kind of fulfills what you talked about, is to create this isolation, to create these tribalized groups, right? Where you can definitely go find your little tribe, and there's tons of people in that tribe because you can come by the super 99-cent store where they can meet up every Sunday
there's
night.
more connectivity now to those all the tribes than there ever has been.
But that tribe, I gotta believe that even they know its roots are pretty unhealthy. I mean, what is other than just...
Yeah, but they don't care. So why don't they care?
Why don't they
It's
care?
the question that why and how are my two favorite questions in all of life.
Well, I would say it's because they already feel ostracized. So it's like, okay, I'm already on the outs.
In a marginalized group.
Yeah, I'm already in a marginalized group, so,
Well, to me, like, this stuff is happening, like, I don't know if you guys see, on the San Francisco Bridge or the Golden Gate Bridge, where they'll shut down the bridge for the night or for several hours, and they're spinning cars, and doing stuff right in the middle of the bridge. And there's, this is pretty common occurrence, like, not just there, but all over. I mean, mostly in warm weather, sort of big cities.
Yeah.
But in LA, Vegas, where they're shutting down big intersections and taking them over.
And causing traffic and just...
Well, whatever shutting down an intersection does.
Yeah.
And they're doing that for, a couple hours at a time.
Yeah.
And... I don't know if you guys have seen these. It's
I
really
haven't
common.
seen that,
it's
but
happening all over the place.
Yeah.
And I think it's just indicative of what we're talking about.
Well, and I've talked to police who say they cannot, there's a mandate in the city of Denver that they cannot pursue any of those guys. They will not ticket them. It's a city mandate. So I got to believe in San Francisco.
Yeah, what are you going to do? You have to send 50 cops in there. There's no way to actually police that.
Well, there is a way to police it,
Yeah?
for sure. Yeah, and even police will tell you this because, I mean, that's their job, right? I mean, this is the job when it gets so antagonistic that Ted himself can't go out and stop these guys, but they do have a police force. And so it might take a little time for them to undo this mess, but if you started ticketing them,
just start doing it.
Just start doing it. Start somewhere and just start breaking up.
Show them that we're going to do more than nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
But the cops that know that this mandate is coming from somewhere above them, I've asked them, so what does it do to you guys to know that your hands are tied and that you can't do law enforcement? Because this is what one of them told me. He said, our hands are tied and we cannot do law enforcement. If we go to another municipality, we can, and I know the difference. This is the cop talking. He said, I could go to another municipality and do law enforcement, but in this city, you cannot. I said, what does that do to your morale?
Totally demoralizing.
He said, there is no morale. There is no morale in the entire city and county of Denver Police Department. So you do the math on that and tell me why it's unique to these certain cities. I mean, it's a top-down mandate. And so there's a weird thing that in me makes me kind of think that there's a top-down mandate for all of this stuff that you and I talked about yesterday about connectedness, right? This whole personal responsibility leads us to like go talk to our neighbor and try to sort it out. And we know if we are really engaged by that personal responsibility force, I got to do this in a way that's going to keep us in this, keep the skids greased, so to speak, so that we can have an open dialogue. There can be a forum for discussing this.
Yeah, you can't just bring the hammer down.
You can't just bring the hammer down. You're going to get met with that's like saying that to the guy revving the motorcycle. You're a dick. Well, you're a dick too.
Yeah.
Boom, boom. And that's never going to, but if you practice this method, and you start, like if we start teaching our kids to practice the method of personal responsibility from an early age, they don't want to go out and kick sand in people's face with a freaking street racer. They just won't, they will never enter their mind. And so that's why my buddy comes up with all the rules. He came up with another rule yesterday about something else. I'm like, dude, it doesn't matter the rules. You just have to have some moral compass in your head so that every situation that's totally unique, right? You can't devise rules for every freaking situation on planet Earth. You just have to have some moral fortitude and a moral compass in your mind and be able to exercise it.
So that's the backbone of white blood cells.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
All that to be said.
Is to have the moral compass to where we don't have to live by rules. It's not that structured. It's not that rigid. And the cops can go do cop-worthy things.
That's why God gave us this big fat noodle in our head, right? He empowered us to use it, right?
So how would we incent people to take that on? I mean, obviously, you just naturally take that on. Like it's a hot point for you. You like it, maybe not like it, but you feel driven to keep the peace, to whatever. So I'm back to the root cause. Why? I mean,
where's the line though of like people pleasing though, right? Because I feel like I get caught up in not wanting to like disrupt. I want to keep the peace. Like, I feel like sometimes I err on the side when my wife is like, no, get in there and freaking tell that manager that they freaking suck. I'm like, babe, it's just not a big deal.
Right.
Like,
It's funny. My wife's always the one holding me back from doing that.
Okay,
yeah.
We all need that balance.
Yeah. My girlfriend is embarrassed and she knows when I'm going down that road and she's like, oh God, how long is this going to last? But she loves it too. I mean, she likes the white blood cells part of it. Like, wow, I would have never stuck up for myself like that. And you did. And you not only did, but you got what was right, what was coming to us.
I feel like I've gotten better at it as I've gotten older. Mm-hmm. Like I've been just more secure and like, I don't really care what people think. But I guess my question still is that, okay, so what's that balance? Like one is where, hey, I'm going to be like where's the line? And I think I brought this up on the very first episode, right? It's like when the whole COVID thing happened, it was like, how dare you not get vaccinated? Now you're infecting my space with your, deal. And so it's kind of like the same way. It's like, well, if that guy wants the freedom to like crank his, pipes and have fun and be loud and whatever, like at what level is who's to say that's a disruption? Because him and all of his friends don't think it's a disruption.
I don't want to derail anything, but to me, that's a finer point on the question is, why are people this way? That they don't care, that they don't want to take the white blood cell approach. They don't want to take that person, and that was what you were just asking, like, why, what's the cause of that? And how do we address that? Your question of, where's the line, I think is obviously valid. And there's a lot of nuance there, and there's a lot of places to discuss there. But I think the question of why is it this way to begin with is a little bit more of a relevant question.
Well, it's a more root oriented question, right? Like why, like what is causing it to happen? Because we gotta like source that. It's
and where did we see the break? I mean, I think we have a good spread of generations here, right? And so if we go back like decades, is there a point to where we saw things shift or change?
Well, you guys all know the term the greatest generation, right?
Sure.
The World War II generation.
Yeah.
I mean, those guys, this conversation would never have existed in that era of this country, right? They would never. I mean, those guys wanted to go to war to fight for this country. How many guys do you know now, if we were going, like,
Right.
We're going to war with Ukraine. Let's jump on this bandwagon, get this thing done. How many guys, if you went out and talked to 20, and I've talked to you about this, just like a posse. Let's get a posse together.
Yeah.
There's no posse coming to save you now. So somewhere between the Greatest Generation and now, this came off the rails. And so I don't know. Do you any of you guys
I have thoughts.
go?
Yeah. So I just finished actually reading. It's the first book I've read in quite a while because I've been on audiobooks. But With the Old Breed by E.B. Sledge, who was a private, maybe private, first class, I don't remember, in the Marines during World War II in the Pacific Theater. So he was there at Peleliu, which was a awful, terrible, 10,000 something. A bunch of Americans died. It was a really, really tough place. And then Okinawa, which was also really, really hard fighting. And he talks about guys, it was actually not unheard of at all to hear of guys committing suicide because they had, medical issue that would keep them from going to the war. So they would, that was it.
Right.
You didn't want to be the guy from the neighborhood that didn't want to do his part.
Right.
And I think a huge part of why that's so unthinkable today, even people having that reaction, or if they brought back a draft, there would be riots, I think it's because education has sort of taught us that the country's not that great, that in fact, not only should you not love it, but that you should despise it. I mean, Howard Zinn's book, what is it? It was written in the early 90s, and it's basically, the actual history of America. I forget the title of the book, but, huge in academic intellectual circles. And it basically said, America's terrible. We, destroyed all the Native Americans. We did all this. But when you look back, what culture didn't do that at some point to claim the land that they're living on? None of them. Yeah. And so I could go off on this for a while, but all land is conquered land. Everywhere that anyone ever sits or resides is conquered from someone or another.
Right.
The Navajo weren't there first.
No.
They beat the people who were there before them.
Yeah.
And so it's not their land. There's sort of a might versus right. And this is a much deeper conversation that could be had on this topic. But to demonize America specifically for doing things that every nation on earth has done, essentially, it's crazy to me. But people have been taught that America is bad. You're living on stolen land. You should feel guilty for it. You should feel guilty for the color of your skin. You did it, even though it was something that your ancestors did. You're now benefiting from that, and so that makes you part of the problem. Right. And this whole concept, why would you want to fight for that country? Who would want to fight for that?
Who would want to fight for it? Exactly. And I'll tell you something, and this is
sorry.
No, that's awesome, dude. That's awesome. It's good that you get that passionate about it, because there is an inherent passion to that subject, right?
Yeah.
Every one of the videos that we posted so far, I don't know if I emailed you guys, and if you noticed that, anytime that we talk about nationalism on these videos, those do not get views. Okay.
Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Yeah. National.
Yes.
Okay.
If you talk about nationalism, there is somebody who does not want that conversation
existing. That's been turned into where it's white supremacism. I mean, that has equals now because of the way that it gets used.
And it's the same kind of conversation that we had yesterday. I keep pointing to John because we talked for 2 hours yesterday about connectedness. Right? There's this isn't my explanation of the world, but I learned this recently from another reading, and this is a genius book, Jamie Winship. We can post a link to this book because I think it's a phenomenal book, and he talks about there's, worldviews. Everybody thinks, well, I'm a Christian, I'm a Jew, I'm a Muslim, I'm a hoarder, I'm a money monger, whatever. There's all these worldviews. He goes, no. There's two worldviews. There's one worldview that this world is finite and resources are hard to come by, and I must compete with other people to get those resources, and I must hang on to them desperately, right? That's one worldview.
The pie's only so big.
The pie's only so big, and I got to get my piece. The other worldview is that the world is abundant and there is connectedness. And if you stop and think about this, you can start to really see how that, us internalizing one of those two becomes really endemic or indicative of how we get stuck. Almost everybody's stuck in this culture in number one.
Yeah.
We gotta hoard. There's no
I have to get
connectedness.
mine.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. It's so true. I think that's where we need to maybe try to help people see the abundance, right? I mean, and I think I always like think of this world around us shows us that God has provided abundantly, right? You get one tomato and there's like 1,000 tomato seeds inside that one tomato that then grows 1,000 plants that grow hundreds of tomatoes.
Right.
If that's not abundance, I don't know like what is, you know?
Right.
And so again, it's waking people up, because I think when you have people divided and separated and living in fear constantly of like, oh, I have to get mine, then all of a sudden you have more ability to control them, make them live in fear. And fear obviously, you know, generates all sorts of other things that are unhealthy and
Right.
and you know,
Yeah.
controlling. So
Go.
Well, there's only one way I see to effectively get that message out, and that's to live from that place. You know yourself. I mean,
Which is the point of the podcast, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
Sort of
exactly.
be the white blood cell.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I think
What-
that's right.
The fear and shame and guilt, right? Those are the things that I think they
There they go
want
again.
us. Well, you know, I mean, you got to recognize that there's a lot of that insistence that has been worked into our lives from a lot of different angles. School, maybe church, depending on what church you're involved in, depending on religion, workplace. You know, shame and guilt and fear, those things just keep you from going to your neighbor and just saying, hey, man, let's figure this out, right? And this connectedness thing, to your point, the abundance is in. I always make this point too. Humans aren't snakes. We can't survive on our own. It's evidenced throughout all of human history. There's plenty of movies and stories about this. Humans are social creatures, and we do pretty fabulous things when we do things together. And the connectedness thing, once you start to, like, I haven't been able to embrace that until very, very recently. And the power that's contained in that is very much like the seeds that you're talking about. I think that's what God, nature, the universe intends us to understand and recognize. Somebody's trying to keep a lid on that.
Yeah, there's an interesting tension I'm feeling right now. I don't know if you guys are, but it's like that might be the reason for like what Mark admitted and what I admitted, that sometimes I just want to not say something when I could or whatever. And it's, in my mind at least, it's to keep that connectedness, right? It's to not make waves, to get in the way of that, right? Because going up to somebody who has a barking dog feels like a confrontation. It feels like the opposite of connectedness. But you know what happens every time I do it? If I do it well and skillfully, and I breathe before I go do it or whatever, is I end up really connected to that person.
Yes.
Actually, because you're being authentic. You're
Because
being real.
yes, exactly.
And it pisses my wife off, dude. Could you come over here and be with me on this issue just for a minute? Could you get out of your own vibe long enough, you know, with your 6 dogs and everything, to understand that it really affects my wife and it affects her life, and that affects my life, it affects Jack's life, blah blah blah. Right?
Yeah. I promise you, if I go back and I haven't gone back to talk to that guy, but I promise you there's a connection with him just from that weird, unique conversation that could not be recreated in any other situation. Have you guys ever heard that phrase, like, knowing I have a sword and I know how to use it, but I keep it sheathed, right?
I know my name is Manuga Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die.
Right. But
I don't know that.
you don't know. Okay,
No,
so
I
I
haven't heard
probably I need my computer in front of me so I can Google these
Yeah,
things.
we need a Jamie.
Where's our producer?
I know. I'm gonna start getting a computer here so we.
No,
can
but the point is, you as a man, right? It's our identity, and goes back to that Jamie Winship book too. Once you figure out what your true identity as a man is, it's to be a protector, it's to be a provider, it's to be a creator, it's to be those things that we've been short-circuited from being. Once you connect with that identity, well, then that stuff, like, sometimes you're going to have to go out and you're going to have to ruffle some feathers. If you learn how to ruffle them properly, it becomes a skill, right? It becomes like playing the piano or any other skill that you develop. In the beginning, you probably are going to suck at it. Yeah. But it's a skill, and sometimes you're going to ruffle some feathers. But
so what's the motivation for others? I mean, I'm motivated to do it because I think it's the right thing to do, right? And I'm gonna demonstrate it by, if I get shortchanged, I'm gonna say I got shortchanged. I'm not just gonna go, well, it's only $2 or whatever. I'm gonna actually say it, But what's the motivation for the Harley guy? What's the motivation for the people that are drag racing? What's the motivation for the guy with the 6 dogs to come from this place?
Yeah. I mean, I think it goes back to that speech that guy gave. It's, you're talking to a 4-year-old and, you're a big boy now. Mm-hmm. I mean, let's face it. Like the thing that I said to this on the first podcast of what's the common thread between Harleys and street racers and loud monster trucks. And the common thread is not that they're beacons of social responsibility, right? They're just the opposite of that. So we all know that these are some kind of weird childhood psychological things that are being outlet into this weird thing. So we get the motivation is let's become big boys now, right? This has run its course on acting like 4-year-olds. It's time for us to be big boys and start taking care of ourselves, our community, and our nation. God forbid we should actually want to engage that. We don't need Donald Trump to do it all for us. We have to engage ourselves to do it as well. I mean, that's the basis. I think we've been completely disconnected from that.
Yeah.
So, when you ask what's the motivation for the guy with 6 dogs, the motorcyclist, all the rest, and I think there isn't any unless there's community. The only motivation could be because I care about someone else enough to change my behavior, because it's impacting someone else negatively. If you don't know that person, you generally don't care that it's impacting them negatively because there is no community. You don't see the repercussions of that action.
Right.
You don't get blowback. You don't get to hear from that person's dad that, that was an issue, as if you were living in a village or, some place where community is everything.
Which is why it's so important that you go up and because that guy did hear from the dad.
But you
got to start somewhere. Right?
Yeah,
you got to start.
But I think it's community. You're
totally right. You got to.
When you're living in a big city, driving through the city, you don't know any of these people. Why would you care that your muffler is too loud?
You're on this. I mean,
right.
We
I passed a 65-year-old lady, both hands today.
Yeah.
Just texting.
Her hands were on the wheel too, but her phone was there, and I'm like.
Well, I've actually started paying attention when I go to the gym. I go to Planet Fitness by me, which that's a whole nother story that we're not talking about.
More pig blood.
No, this is PG.
Okay. Good callback.
But I'll not take my phone sometimes, and I'll make them look me up by phone number. The 20-year-old is. Whatever.
Yeah. Okay, Grandpa.
Yeah. Whatever, dude. How could you not be with your phone? But I'll look around. I'll be on the treadmill, whatever, and I'm looking, and there'll be 30 people there. There'll be one other person not on their phone, and that creates the silo, right?
Mm-hmm.
This makes me
absolutely.
go deep.
It's the technology that allows it.
Yeah.
I just read a story about cafes and I don't know some sort of cosmopolitan California area or maybe New York, but these cafes that they're technology free, like check your technology at the door. Yeah. And that those are sort of on the rise because I think people are hungry for that.
Yeah. Well, I think of comedy clubs do that too.
Sure.
One, you
they
can't
don't want you to record,
but 2, that you're present
to focus.
and you're
right. Yeah. And I think people are hungry for that because that has almost been stolen from us. I mean, in a way, it's basically we're stealing it from ourselves, but we've been convinced to do so. But in a way, it's sort of been that authenticity, that being present, that being fully invested in the moment that you're in right now is gone. Yeah. But I think the human desire for that has not gone anywhere.
It's innate.
And I think people are craving that sort of authenticity and that in the momentness. And I don't, maybe there's probably a lot of business opportunities there,
yeah,
but
maybe tying what I'm seeing a full circle here. What Adam's saying with white blood cells, with I mean the community thing, the hunger for it, right? I mean my favorite place in Keystone that I go skiing with the kids is a little cafe shop. It says, we don't have it's got a little chalkboard. It says, we don't have Wi-Fi. Pretend like it's 1995 and talk to each other. If you're sitting at the table where that sign is right there, people get on their phones, on their technology.
Yeah.
They'll say,
Yeah.
excuse me, to
Yeah.
take a picture of that, right?
Sure.
But maybe that's the business opportunity for white blood cells is provide that community, right? And then also tie it into the way you create community is you go talk to the guy with the dog and
Yeah.
you get over your fear.
Yeah.
And the uncomfortableness only lasts for a little while. And then there's potentially a great connection that comes out of it.
There's
You meet your neighbor campaign almost. Just boil it down to the simple. Just go meet your neighbor. How much of a difference would that make if everybody knew the neighbor to the left and the right of them?
Yeah.
in the
Exactly
country?
right, though. I mean, it's really hard to spit on somebody that you know.
Yeah.
It's real easy to somebody.
Well, and it's interesting even how it's changed over the years, because I remember when we first bought a condo back in like 2005. When we moved in, we had like 3 or 4 people who lived in the condo come up and like bring us cookies,
Oh, wow.
or like, oh, hey, welcome to the condo kind
Yeah,
of thing.
yeah.
You know, moving in 2022 in a nice neighborhood, you know, lots of neighbors all around, like one person who was like behind us, like brought us cookies.
Right.
And I'm like, how come no one else came and said, hey, welcome to the neighborhood? Like, you know, whatever.
Yeah,
But I feel like even further back in the 80s and the, 90s, like it was like a common thing where it's like, hey, you moved into the neighborhood and like people are coming over
People-
and they're
yeah, they
bringing
wanna
you
get to
stuff
know
and
you.
they're like,
Yeah.
hey,
Yeah.
welcome to the neighborhood, you know.
Well, you know what? Come to think of it, we moved to Florida, 2002. My first kid was born, and Glenn Beck,
Yeah.
Yeah.
radio show. His wife brought us. They lived right across the street. I had no idea. His wife brought us this whole pie thing, and we sat down with them. For the next 3 years, we hung out with a whole group of Mormons, and they became our best friends, and it was amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
we just
Yeah.
walked into a community because she made the effort to bring
Yeah.
us this pie.
I've never known a Mormon that was like a mean person.
No.
Seriously, they have all been almost model citizens.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Well,
Listen, they believe
they-
they really
you know,
live what they believe.
yeah.
It
Well,
seems
and I
like,
think
but-
that's what and honest, and I know, like, this isn't a Christian podcast or like that, but
And I'm not Mormon.
and yeah, and I don't really agree with the Mormons. We could probably do a
Right.
whole podcast
Yeah, well,
breaking
fine,
down their
fine.
theology
But,
and all that stuff.
real
But again,
nice
the tenets
people.
are there,
Yes,
and I think they hold each other accountable.
Yeah.
and I think that's why it's so successful of a community. But I will say that that's why I think that Christianity and Jesus is the way to get everyone to this. And I think that's why it's important to evangelize and share your faith and bring people in, because if you start to follow the tenets of the Bible, and I'm just going to say it, is like God has a blueprint for success for the world, society, for man. In the beginning, he created man, and he said, be fruitful and multiply. He said, take dominion over this earth. Take the earth and then populate it and make it successful. Like that was a commandment that he gave us in the very beginning. And then it goes on, love your neighbor as yourself,
Right.
Turn the other cheek. Like it's like if we just all followed some of these tenets that like Jesus taught, like the world would be a different place. And I think that's why one is that Christianity has changed the world as we know it because of a small group of people. And I think I was telling you this, like, I want to say at some point in the early church, it had been back down to like 700 people in this small like community, in Rome or Middle East or something like that. And they had outlawed it and were killing all Christians and stuff like that. But this small community of people just started taking in the homeless, and they started loving the widows and following the tenets of the Bible. And from that small group of people, it changed the entire world, and then reignited from this small group into billions of people, and, changed the world. And so I think at the end of the day, there is an element of like these principles and tenets are found in the Bible. And I
Right.
think through Christianity, and again, I know that everyone's kind of on a different journey and does a thing, but for me, I'm like, dude, that's the way, and that's how I think if we can share more of that, if we can just be loving, with to our neighbor, and if we can, be kind and generous to people around us, that's when we're going to start to make a big difference. And it all starts with us as individuals, right? And even like this friendship and this group, of us just getting together. It's like you randomly wandered into my office several months ago, and now, I look at you as like a really good friend, like a close friend. So it's like, all we were doing was just being curious and then just being, kind to each other,
Well, and it's a big part of it too is that like men are always going to be competitive, right? You have to be competitive to survive. It's just a part of life. But then the counter to that is you also have to be. You don't have to be this, but it's really, really cool if you are, and that is cooperative and giving. And if you really let go of what we've been kind of trained to be, is this guy who's trying to compete for his stuff and keep it to himself. If you realize, wow, there's a lot more to this connectedness thing. That's a cultural thing. I think it's unique to this country because I keep talking to people that are in these South America. I've got a website company that's down in South America, and those guys are just the most like willing, truthful, cooperative. I talked to Ben, your other website guy. He's in Morocco, and he talked to me about he said, "Did you hear that in the background?" And I said, "No, what was it?" He said, "It's a prayer call, and they do it's Islamic country, of course, but they do a prayer call 5 times a day." And I'm like, "Wow, man, that's pretty cool." Because I said, does that help you really think about like reconnecting with spirituality? If nothing, just in a general sense, like connecting with spirituality, just the reminder to have it 5 times a day. In this country, the only thing we're reminded about 5 times a day is how much is in your bank account, right? Right? To the Italian talking right now. That's a good. No, money, right? I mean, that is on our door. That's the language we speak here. That's the only language that we know is money, and it's very isolating to talk about your silos. It just keeps us in this so much competitive space and so isolated, I think.
Yeah, and what we've gathered here is that community is the big deal, right? And I think the reason why Mormon works, I mean, I can't do tablets and Joseph's, all that stuff, right? But I mean,
it's easier to do flat Earth, really.
Way easier, dude.
But I was literally considering and almost pulled my wife into it, the kids becoming Mormon, because they're so amazing. And Glenn Beck, I'd let him speak for himself, but without getting into too much detail, he's like, dude, look at the fruit. The tree can't be that bad if the fruit is this good, right? And great point. And or whether it's Christianity or whatever, but I think community is the bottom line of what we're talking about here for accountability, for personal responsibility, and for community. Those are the themes that I see. I'm always pulling back, looking for the root cause, right? But whether it's however you do community, and even bigger than that is love. I mean, that's what we're saying with Mormon. That's what we're saying with accountability. That's what we're saying with Christianity, right? It's love. I don't really think. I don't know. I should probably just.
No, guys have a hard time talking about that too. And that's another cultural programming that I think we're supposed to be tough guys, and we're supposed to not really
less so with the newer generations, I think.
Maybe you're right, but I don't even know with them.
Our generations, it was always like, don't be gay. Like that was like,
well, that was that
moniker. Now totally the pendulum swung too far the other way.
Please be gay.
But that was basically a holdover from our dads, though. Sort of like, just be macho, be tough, make sure everybody knows that you're heterosexual, sort of thing. And then, joking about being gay was the whole thing. But
we had games like Smear the Queer.
Oh, I remember.
This football guy on ESPN the other day was trying so hard to find another for that.
He wanted to say it, but he
wanted to say it because we all played that game. They would not say it, dude.
Poor guy. No, there's no way out of that one.
No way.
Smear the... I don't know what I was going to say.
He did actually come up with a good alternative. I can't remember what it is right now. Good for him, though.
Yeah.
Talking about sort of love and that sort of thing, like... I don't know. Mark, you and I have like told each other that, for, a long time and been comfortable saying that to each other.
Yeah. I know. I started saying to Ted on the phone, like, all right, love you, dude.
Yeah.
Ted's like,
There's only a two. Listen, man. I swear to God,
all right, talk to you soon.
Gotta go. No, there's only one other person in my life who tells me that she loves my wife tells me sometimes.
Yeah.
No, but I have a client. She's this old black lady who tells me I started working with her like 15 years ago, and she is the sweetest woman, and her and I developed a really great connection, and I was taken aback because she told me a few years ago that she loved me, and I was like, oh my God, it was really shocking to have a stranger, because at that point in my life, I was like, oh, I don't even know if I want to say that to my family.
yeah.
But I think it just goes to the point, like how we are really disconnected from just even saying it, let alone actually like thinking about what that means. I started thinking about what it means with her because I'm like, well, she's just a client. How could she say that to me? And we get another on the opposite end of the spectrum. I had another guy in my office, this real estate agent who kind of talked. There's some uniqueness to their whole philosophy about life too, I think. But for him, he would say this phrase: "It's just business." And whenever somebody says that to me, I know I'm about to get
Hey man, it's just business.
Right?
Yeah. I'm gonna screw you right about now.
All morality goes right out the window.
I know this is unethical, but it's just business.
So from then on, that phrase is just like, it's one of my biggest hot buttons in the world. Whenever somebody uses that phrase, I will freaking hold them down to the mat because, dude, there's no excuse for ever even thinking that phrase, let alone saying it and then executing whatever is about to come after that.
Yeah.
So fuck that guy. And I'm not going to use his name here, but that's the spectrum of love versus whatever the opposite of that is.
Yeah. Why don't we talk about what it means? I don't think it means anything corny or sappy, or it just means I got your back. I'm an advocate for you. I give a shit about you. I want things to go well for you. That's all I'm talking about. I mean, it can be anything you want, but to me, that's the basis. Like even if you approach the guy with the 6 dogs with a heart of love, I'll go ahead and say it.
Yeah.
It's going to go well. If you go, I got an agenda, you got an agenda, I'm right, you're wrong, fuck you, it's probably not going to go so good.
Exactly. And I think it's just that openness to the possibilities, right? The openness to the possibilities of, I'm not going over here with ill will. And we're just going to sort through the possibilities. Maybe there's a really good reason why his dog is barking, and let's like stay open to that possibility or whatever the case is, right? Every case is unique. And so the love thing in my mind is just staying open-minded and open-hearted. I'm sure there's some verse that you seriously
Well, no, I was thinking about I don't know if you read the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Mm-hmm. And he talks in the very beginning. He tells the story of, he's on the train like in New York or something like that, and he's had a long day at work, and there's this kid who's being super annoying, and this dad is just sitting there, I
remember.
Yeah, and he's just sitting there, just kind of his own little world, and letting the kid jack around, and the guy just starts to get mad, like, why aren't you taking care of your kid? Look at this kid, like he's just making a nuisance and bothering all these people around you, and like you need to take care of your kid. So he starts to get this heart of bitterness and anger towards this guy who's just neglecting his child to just run amok on this train. And finally, like, it got to him where he like reached over to the guy and said, "Hey man, can you take care of your kid?" And the guy looks up at him and he says, "Oh, I'm sorry, his mother just died and we're just coming from the hospital and I'm just trying to think about, all the things that I need to do." And it's like, oh man, like all of a sudden that just diffused him instantly. All the judgment, everything just went out the door, because it was like, now all of a sudden he's putting himself in that place of like, oh my goodness, like now this dad has to take care of this kid without a mom, and like this lady just died, and now he's
the kid's rambunctious, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. And so it's like always keeping that open mind, and I think for me that's how I try to approach everything. One of our values at our office is, assume the best in our clients and each other, where it's like, okay, if we get an email from somebody, let's not just think that it's going to be worst case scenario and whatever, but let's like assume the best in them, you know. And I try to approach that in every situation to where it's like, all right, I'm going to just assume the best and then get more details.
Yep.
Well, and like what you said, John, is if you approach other people with that heart, the situation, any potential conflict mitigates itself just by way of that's what's in your heart. That's the approach that you're taking. And I know this from experience because I have taken the opposite approach many, many times. What am I on the Enneagram scale?
1.
I'm a 1, which is like, you know, I want
very
justice.
black and white,
I'm black
justice
and white.
oriented.
I will go out and cause conflict almost intentionally, just not with any necessarily ill will, but I just want to sort things out. And so I've taken the opposite approach and found that it does not work. But when you do that, that's what I think of when I think of love, is just really like approaching it with an open mind and an open heart. And when you do, it diffuses all of the bad stuff. So your company mantra or that philosophy, God, that's really healthy, because you'll just open doors that you otherwise would never have found.
That's kind of biblical.
It's very biblical, because in the New Testament, there are 3 Greek words used for love: eros, phileo, and agape. Eros, from our word erotica, or means sexual love. Phileo, where Philadelphia was named after, city of brotherly love, and that's the love for your brother. And then agape is unconditional, complete, and total love. And that's the word that's generally used to describe God's love toward us. And that's the word that we're called to love our neighbors as ourselves. When Jesus said, I think it's in Matthew, there's really only 2 commandments that matter. You can hang all the rest of the law and the prophets on these 2. So pay attention, love God with all your heart and soul and mind. And number 2, love your neighbors yourself. You do those things, you're following God's commandments. And so I think, it's just that, to be called to that unconditional love. And when I was sitting here thinking about you guys talking about limits and, like, you know, where do you draw the line, and how much of yourself do you give before you've been run over enough? And I think if you're going to give that sort of love, and this is really just challenging me to be this way, just this conversation. But if you're going to live that way, you're going to take a few knocks. You're
there's tons of risk.
People you're going to get taken advantage of. You're going to have those things happen. And I think you got to push through that, like to be a white blood cell sort of. Your job is you've got to truck on, soldier on. And I think the benefits become evident really clearly, you know, once you start being that way to people, and the payback, you know, sort of like, you know, with your guy and the dogs or whatever it is. The responses you get back, and that's a real small improvement in society. You know, that's a little step towards more community and more understanding and more empathy. So I think we're just called to that agape love of unconditional, and it's reinforcing that concept of assuming, you know, that the other person has the right intentions, or the other person's going through something that would cause them to act this way. Assume that you know, they need a little extra. And if we do that with everybody in our lives, I think that spreads. Right. I really do.
Yeah. We do it without thinking that we're being taken advantage of, or our cup's less because we gave this.
Right.
It's like, no, we're really in this together. We're right.
And it actually turns out your cup gets filled when you pour it out.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because giving is getting.
Exactly. That's karma. That's what? Forgiveness. That's every concept, you know.
Yeah.
Right.
I
Well, and I can't remember who I was talking to about this. I think I shared this story. Maybe you and I were talking, Ted. But I think I texted you or called you. So I was like several months ago. My wife and I got in a really big fight.
Oh yeah.
And
you didn't tell me much, just so in case she's watching. But you were like,
she's
it was
not
bad.
watching.
It was bad. She's definitely not watching.
No, but we got in a really bad fight, and I don't. I think it was like over the dumbest thing, because I don't even remember what it was now.
Yeah,
like
usually
I
the dumbest
can't even remember. But it was one of those things where it's like we both dug our feet in, where it was like I'm like, I am right on this. Like, I have been bending over for 20 years and, like, you know, taking the high road, and I'm like, I'm right and you're wrong, and I'm going to
I'll be recognized,
yes,
damn it.
Yeah.
Hill I'm dying.
Yeah, I'm dying on this hill, you know? And so 2 days go by, and it's
Of like no talking, basically.
intense, and the kids are like,
2
"What's
days.
going on?" Like, yeah, it's not good, and I think God just kind of spoke to my heart, and He's like, "This is your battle. Like, this is your cross to bear. Like I don't have to go to war somewhere and try to defend my country and like shoot down people and die on a beach somewhere in France. Like it was like, you know what? Like, I need to be a man, and I need to like live above this situation. And if it means that I'm going to take the brunt of it or take the fall for it or say, honey, you were right. I love you and I want to make things better. Like, that was the thing that I needed to do in order to be the man,
Yeah.
And it was like, I went and got her flowers, and it like took everything within me. Like, I love you. Here's some flowers. Like, can we, can you forgive me, and can we, move on from this? And, she just started sobbing and all that kind of stuff. And my flesh, inside it was kind of like I didn't win.
Yeah.
But then there was an element of like, I think I won.
But you did.
You did
win the human, but you won the spirit.
Yeah.
Right? Which
Yeah.
is the white blood cell, which is the higher calling.
Right.
I mean, you didn't win the human argument, and what a bunch of bullshit. Have you ever noticed that when you do win those, it's completely effing empty?
It's so unsatisfying.
It's so unsatisfying. But when you win that one,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you having to get over yourself, and I've done that too, once or twice. But
Yeah.
where you have to get over yourself, it feels so damn good on the other end. I mean, like the amount of pain you have, like, oh, I love you with gritted teeth and everything, is equal to the abundance that you get showered
Yeah.
upon when you align with whatever you want to call it.
You told me to do the same thing a couple weeks ago, right? I called him and I'm bitching about Tara and whatever. We were in a conflict, and you told me, right?
Yeah.
Go get her some flowers, dude.
Yeah.
And I did. Like, I didn't immediately come to that conclusion, and I drove around the office. I was thinking about going home, drove around a little bit, and I'm like, all right, fuck it. I'm gonna do what he said. I'm gonna take the high road on this. And I did. I went home and I put the flowers on the counter, and she saw them and softened up. Not immediately. I mean, she saw them and she took note of it and said thank you. And it took a while for this thing to transform, right? I mean, and that's the other thing too. Like, someone like me who's very impatient, like, you want immediate results. It took a while, and we just let that thing simmer. And a couple days went by, but the whole vibe after that whole situation, which, like you said, I've had so many fights with girls, not just her. Like, I had a girlfriend, we would fight about shit that we didn't even know what started it ever.
Yep.
The stupidest shit. And her and I would just go to the mat.
It's just pride.
It's just total pride. And so what I've learned is it doesn't, like, as men, really, I think it is our duty to just execute the provision of
It's not fair, and it's our freaking job.
It's our job.
It's
It's
supposed to be fair.
Right.
We're supposed to be higher than not than them.
Yeah.
They have their roles, but that's our job in this whole equation is to be bigger than any humanly situation.
Yeah.
Any human situation.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. This is actually something that has been very applicable to me, and something that has come up in my life recently, just like it has you guys. But, my wife has a tendency to get anxious about things and, to worry, to overthink. And if I'm not leading and I let that sort of dictate the relationship and how we're getting along together and what the stress level is overall, it's not good. It's bad, because that sort of becomes a spiral, and I'm just like, being drug along by my nose ring. But I've been, some people I follow on X, guys that are really sort of, pro family, pro man, pro responsibility sort of thing. It came to the same conclusion, or the same conclusion that I sort of came to when all that stuff hit ahead with the anxiety and the stress. And I came to realize, like, it doesn't matter who's sort of right or wrong. This is my failure. Your stress right now is my failure, because I didn't set the tone of a positive, you know, uplifting, loving environment to where you could feel not anxious. You know, if I'm walking around sort of half pissed, you know, or, you know, I've got that sort of unapproachable look on my face. Like I've got so much going on in my head that like, I can't help fix your stuff too.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
She counts on you to be the rock. Right?
she counts on us.
Yeah.
The whole family counts on the father to set the tone for that family. And it is on us
To be
to
the stability.
be uplifting, to be a rock that stays up
Yeah.
as best we can. We're all going to have situations where we can't carry that load anymore, and there will always be times like that. But for the most part, it's our job to be that, not just steady, but steady positive,
Yeah.
and set the tone for the whole family. And I noticed that when I do that, everything is different. Suddenly, she's just not annoyed by as many things.
Right.
Suddenly, things that were an issue aren't an issue anymore because the whole tone has changed. And if the tone is bad in the family, in the household, it is absolutely my fault.
See, that's cool, man. That's a white blood cell right there, right?
That is badass, man.
Yeah.
And for sure, there's no question your confidence grows out of owning that role too, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Knowing that I have that power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't think there's many, and I've been full cycle with this, right? I don't think there's many actual gold diggers. I really don't. I think there's security diggers.
absolutely.
Yeah.
They just don't feel safe. Like
Yep.
you're supposed to provide, and one of the things that provides is money, right? And
Yeah.
a
It's
house
the most
that's-
obvious thing.
that's stable,
Yeah.
but you're supposed to be the rock. So yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, emasculating young guys is just a short circuiting to that whole thing. Like this imaginary story that men equal women. And look, in terms of like value, yes, men and women both have equal value. But in terms of roles that they play, they don't. It's what we just described. Their role is nurturing, motherly stuff, right? That's all necessary and equally valuable. But our role is to do exactly what you said. They gravitate toward that. Children gravitate toward that.
They
right?
feed right off of
They
it.
feed right off of it. Exactly. You guys ever watch Caesar
Better or
Milan, the dog whisperer?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. That's a great example of that, where he sets the tone.
He totally sets the tone, and
that's how it's going to be.
Yeah.
It's going to be good. We're going to be okay.
And it always works out, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you need that alpha leader. You need a leadership role. I don't know.
So I think as far as white blood cells go, we sort of zeroed in on community and trying to reinforce community and reinforce connection to neighbors and friends. But I think also sort of that reinforcement of the traditional masculine role. We've been taught over the past 10, 15 years that masculinity is toxic.
Yeah.
Yep, that those are toxic traits. And I think those lies have to be pushed back on.
Yeah.
And I think the programming has to be readjusted, and there has to be
What a
more
great-
message of that there's positivity in that masculinity.
What a great challenge for men. I
Yes.
mean, we're just talking about men's job is to overcome the human situation, right? Well,
What a bigger challenge than this.
yeah,
because it does
Let's
seem
say
insurmountable to me.
Yeah.
Like even coming on this, I've sure had lots of opinions and done lots of studying, and probably 2014, I sort of, started having my awakening, maybe 2011, 2012, where I just started realizing, we get lied to about a whole lot of stuff. And, here's how the Federal Reserve works, and here's what the dollar is based on, et cetera, right? So that was sort of my opening. And I remember, I'm posting on Facebook, like, you won't believe that the dollar isn't actually worth anything. And we've lost 97% of our purchasing power. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. The euro's about to crash. This is a coalition that shouldn't even have existed in the first place. Nobody cares. They just want to provide for their families. They want to do well. They want to be comfortable. And so I gave up. I quit. I mean, I said, I'm not going to try and convince anybody of anything, because I felt like it was just yelling into the void, that the message from the media and from culture was so overwhelmingly in the opposite direction of what I felt like the messaging should be, that I felt like there was no beating it. And I had completely given up. So I felt like sort of finally just like thinking maybe it is worth a fight, And when I was young, I was like, boy, it's all worth standing up for. You just have to convince people. If you just do it in the right way, and effectively, you can change minds. But I completely gave up on that just because of how things have gone lately. And this, just even sitting down with you guys has given me a little bit more hope. Just that it is worth fighting for, and a difference can be made. And you may not change the whole world, but if you change, a few lives around you, who knows the ripples.
Well, and I think that's what it is. It's changing the few lives around you.
Sure.
And I think the sum of a man's life is the lives that he's changed around him. And so it's like every day waking up, and this is something that I do every morning. I say, because as a Christian, I believe that I'm not on my journey, I'm on God's journey, and I'm just a tool to be used for his purposes to accomplish his goals. And so for me, I'm like, all right, like, what are you doing today that I can be a part of, and who can I love, and what is that journey?
What a completely different perspective versus waking up and saying like,
who can I crush to get what I need to get mine?
Or what do I have to do? And what is my life instead of trying to plug into somebody else's bigger, better plan.
Yeah,
exactly.
Well, and going back to yours, I think that's such a great way to be, I guess. I don't know exactly where I was going with
and
that.
to put a bow on this conversation.
Yeah.
A pink bow.
Yeah.
I wanted not to take the bow back off. I've been confronted with that a lot. Like every time I go out because I don't give up on this. Like I
You
like
still have the passion to convince people?
I don't know if it's passion. I think it's just stupidity, right?
Drive.
Like I am insistent that I'm going to change somebody. Like I've gone about that in the old forceful ways, like you're like the competitive way.
You're
for a
wrong,
long
and
time.
let me show you the facts, and you'll
And
change
it's
your mind.
retarded, right? That's
Right, it doesn't
everybody's
work.
like, yeah, go fuck yourself. But the ripple effect or the butterfly wings, right? All those analogies are why I finally said this white blood cells thing is where it's. I don't know how that kind of snapped into my mind, but it did. Like well, I'm not going to go change the whole world, but if we get 10 of us around us and then those people, it's going to ripple out. You got to start somewhere, but the ownership of your identity is really, really important. And some days you're going to get your fucking teeth kicked in, right? That's
Going to battle every day.
That's going to battle. God didn't promise us
an easy life.
Put on the armor so you'll be able to stand.
Right. And that is where the reward, that's the rewarding part. I always talk about the reward versus what is rewarding. The rewarding part is what's, self-satisfying. It's the thing that gives you the motivation to go out and do this. That's like, I get to go on a vacation and that's the reward, right? Or I get a big bank account and that's a reward. But the rewarding part of it that makes me go out and do it again every day is the feeling I get inside when I do it. When I went and talked to the guy with the dogs, it was cool. Like there's some weird, you can't really define how it felt, but it's kind of cool, right? You just made that connection. And those connections that get made, I'm telling you, when you get into the real revealing yourself in that truthful way, there's some magic in there. I know it sounds cheesy, but
you were probably proud of yourself because you're taking care of Tara, you're taking care of you, you're taking care of your white blood cell component that's in you, and so your philosophy or the way you think it should be was manifest in your actions.
Yes,
and that feels good. Congruency, authenticity, following. Christian faith, whatever it is for you, feels good.
Also, I think from a slightly more cynical perspective or selfish, that was a certain amount of animosity you were carrying around with you that no longer existed.
Oh, yeah.
So you're sort of relieved of
That's
that
another
stress
big
of
part,
the
right?
anger and
Yeah.
So beneficial on multiple fronts.
Multiple fronts. I think you're right. And I think, Mark, what you're saying about God's plan for us, I know that he's got a plan for all of us, right? Sometimes we don't, and if you want to call it universe, whatever you want to call it, there is a bigger plan that we're all called to. And we all have this, we're all tools of that mechanism, right? And we all should feel empowered to go out and do our duty to execute on that plan. and keep our minds and hearts open to what that plan might be. I think that's another thing that we kind of get short. That's the cell phone thing that we're all so zeroed in on, these distractions, our addictions, our, all of these things that keep us from realizing what that is. If we kind of, and that's what's cool about staying connected with other people too. If you open up enough to actually get to truthful conversations with people, well, then you connect back in with what that actual intention or plan is, I think.
Yeah.
In a better way.
Yeah.
Well, and when Mark said his little piece about, waking up and asking, basically having a conversation with God, saying, what are we doing today? My shoulders came down. It just felt like,
Takes
wow.
the weight off.
It does.
Yeah.
Because I don't have to figure out
What do I have to do?
who I'm going to walk over to get what I need. I'm going to, this is a cooperative effort, and I'm not in the driver's seat. I mean, I'm a co-driver, right? But yeah, that was cool.
It's been real encouraging to me.
Yeah.
I'm taking away to just try and be love to others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As I don't do that enough.
Yeah.
I
It's
tell you
hard.
right now, I
It's
don't
hard.
do it
It's not
enough.
easy at all.
But yeah, to focus on that,
Yeah.
I think it takes intention. It's just like loving someone, you loving your wife, me loving mine, and that's a choice.
You guys loving your girlfriends?
That's a choice. Yeah, whatever is going on in the situation, but that's a
You
choice. that you have
losers
to
over
make
there with girls.
over and over again. Like you have to make a choice to buy the flowers, even though you don't want to do that. That's love.
And to take it to another level too, to just kind of have this. It's going to sound cheesy again too, but walking around this town, this city of Denver, that's like I've been told that these cities, like I was talking to my uncle last week. He goes, Atlanta is just a really angry place, right? And I've said, well, Denver's a lot like that. And I always think to myself, well, the more people that you pack into this tight area, you would think that the more people would realize the need to be really giving and cooperative instead of the opposite. It's really opposite here. And then people won't even look at you. And it's like, to maintain it in your heart, to actually be really loving toward strangers, just like in the elevator going up to the office or something. Like sometimes people are like really kind of crusty or whatever.
Yeah.
It's hard but like you got to challenge yourself, I think, to
That's
stay
such
in
a
that.
worthy effort, though. And
Yes.
it doesn't. It's just like forgiveness. Forgiveness has nothing to do with the other person. You're doing it for you.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You know? And so it doesn't matter if that person looks at you or if they're dismissive or whatever. You're not doing it for them. You're doing it for you.
It's just to
Yeah,
release
so you don't have to hold on to that.
Yeah.
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 But it's contagious as well, right?
Yes.
So if you just walk around with that spirit, you're relieving yourself,
Absolutely.
but eventually the contagion will catch on, I think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the challenge then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, we all got our goals for the
Nice
week. then,
little
right?
bow.
Yeah. There we go.
Boom.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Subscribe
that's it.
away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it.
Is that your red pill or your
That's my white pill.
Okay, your white pill.
My white blood cell.
All right, guys.
Yeah. Until next time.
Yeah.